Martha, and I am a member of the Mount Lebanon Nature Conservancy, and I'm joined by a couple of other members. This is Noelle.
Hi.
Noelle is a student and a junior board member of the Conservancy, and helping us out. Oh, you're going to start filming. Excellent. And then we also have Bernadette. Bernadette is an awesome science educator, and if any of you has been to third grade, raise your hand if you're a third grader or have been a third grader at the Mount Lebanon School District.
At the Mount.
Has anyone done the School in the Park program? Yeah. Or maybe
He just went into fourth grade, so they
got it.
Oh,
Oh, they partners. Okay. Well, Bernadette helps with this awesome program called School in the Park, and so, but Mount Lebanon Nature Conservancy, if you haven't heard about us yet, we do a lot of amazing things, I think. We do a lot of tree plantings in our parks. We also do a lot of maintenance in our parks, so if you're enjoying some nice mulch trails in our parks, you can thank this organization. We're all volunteer, and so we have a board that sort of does different parts of it. And we do educational programs like this one. We're trying to do more that are hands-on and geared towards a younger audience, because I think that's, you know, part of the future here. So anyway, welcome everyone. So today we are going to talk about maple sugaring. So who's ever tapped a maple tree before? Some of you have. Excellent. Well, what season is it, by the way, kiddos?
Winter.
Winter. But what's the next season that's coming right after winter? Spring. And what happens in nature? You can raise your hand and give me one observation of what you think happens in the spring. Yes, my friend.
The snow melts and rain gets into the snow and mixes them up.
That's right. So it's getting a little bit warmer, so the snow is starting to melt. What else, my friend?
Leaves start to grow on trees again.
Leaves start to grow pretty soon.
It's breeding season.
Yes, it is breeding season out in nature. Excellent.
Animals.
All the animals are the birds are starting to build their nests. Have you guys all been hearing the birds, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Like they are super welcome. We are just starting out right now. So if you get a chance, if you can sign in at some point in time, that'll be awesome. All right, so lots of changes happening in the spring. Well, plants is not quite as obvious the changes that are happening, but there's a lot of changes happening inside the plants. So for trees, you mentioned that they start producing the leaves. Well, in fall, what happens to those leaves?
They lose them.
So all those leaves start falling down in the fall. The leaves, I'm going to pick up a leaf over here. This is a leaf from a deciduous tree, okay? Deciduous trees actually lose their leaves over the fall. And the reason is deciduous trees actually make nice big leaves that are trying to capture all that sunlight. Why do plants want to capture sunlight? You know?
Because they want to grow bigger.
They want to grow bigger. They're making something from that sunlight. Who knows what that is? Yes, ma'am.
Energy through the process of photosynthesis.
Energy from the process of photosynthesis. Excellent. And exactly what kind of energy that is, does anyone know?
Food.
Food or sugar, right? So if you've ever eaten a candy bar, you can thank a plant, because candy would not be possible. Sugar is not possible without plants. So trees are also making this lovely sugar from the sun in the fall, and that sugar basically powers everything from growth to putting out their leaves, etc. But in the fall, they drop these leaves because the days start getting shorter, there's less sunlight, and so it's not profitable to keep this up. So they basically drop their leaves, and that's it for the year. But they don't want to lose all that lovely sugar. So what happens to the sugar? In the fall, all that sugar that's been made, actually, the trees take it somewhere. Where do they take it?
Back down into the trunk.
Even further down. Where do they take it? All the way down. Yes, my friend?
To the roots.
To the roots. So they take all that sugar and they transport it all the way to the root. Now, trees actually have something that looks a whole lot like plumbing. It's basically, it almost looks like a bunch of straws inside, or they act like a bunch of straws inside. Those straws or tissues take water from the soil and they take it all the way up to the top of the tree, and they'll take sugar and all that sugary stuff that's being made, and they'll take it all through the tree to the different limbs. But in the fall, all that sugar gets all the way down into the roots and they store it as starch in the roots. The trees are pretty much dormant after that in the winter time, like right about now. But in the spring, they need all that sugar to come back up. So how does that sugar get back up to the tops of the trees? Yes, my friend.
The roots, the tissue glue rolls it up or something.
So there has to have some way of getting that stuff all the way up. So here's what happens. It's actually really cool, and it's simply physics. So as the days get warmer, the pressure actually builds in the tissues of the plant. So if you notice, most of the days now things are warming up. We're getting above 40 degrees during the day, but at night the winter temperatures are still there. So the temperature drops and it's really cold. It's below freezing. So that thaw, that up and down, actually makes the tissues, all the water and all the sugars sort of start moving. There's gases that start expanding in there, and that pushes all of this sap up the tree to the branches where the tree can use it. Now, what about these types of trees? Do you guys know, I talked about deciduous trees. What are these called? I'm gonna go back here, my friend.
Evergreen?
Evergreen, right? And why are they called evergreen?
Because they're always green, even in the winter time.
Exactly, they do not lose their leaves in the winter. And if you notice, I'm gonna pass this around so you guys can all look at it actually. And parents, if you're not comfortable, just let me know. But you can just take a look and pass it. If you notice, these leaves are a little bit different. They're actually much smaller. Okay, they're much smaller. They also have a waxy cuticle on them. And this allows them to photosynthesize even in the winter. So they take advantage of all that little bit of sun that's coming in, and they have this waxy cuticle or cover on the leaves that doesn't let the water evaporate, so they don't lose a whole lot of water in the process. So these are evergreen. So evergreens don't have to worry about this because they're sort of semi-active all year. So we're talking just about the deciduous trees. Now, who has had maple syrup before? Oh my goodness, everybody should be raising their hand. So maple syrup actually looks like this. Oh, I should probably cover up the brand names and stuff like that. But how do we make maple syrup? What does that process look like? My friend over here?
It comes from the sap.
It comes from the sap, but is the sap totally sweet?
No, you make a hole in the tree and then it goes into a bucket and then it goes to a factory that makes it into maple syrup.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to talk all about those little bits of it. So the first thing you need to know though, since maple syrup comes from maple sap, is what does a maple tree looks like? So can anyone point out a maple tree right now? How do we know? No leaves, right? So if you're a commercial grower of maple or tapper of maples, you would have gone out into the sugar bush. That's what you call a collection of maple trees, and you would have already marked out those trees. So you would have marked it out and you would know exactly where to go in the spring. In fact, you'd be so ready, you'd have your taps ready, and the first time, right before the weather changes, you'd go get your taps in there and you'd be ready to go. But there are clues even in the winter. If you haven't marked out your trees, there are clues to tell you what the different trees are. So one of the biggest clues is that maples actually have branching that is opposite. So if you look at these branches, this is the main branch coming here. If you look at the side branches, they come right opposite of each other, right? So there's only 4 species of trees in North America that have this branching: maples, ashes, dogwoods, and horse chestnuts. And they make a lovely acronym. If you can just remember MAD HORSE, that'll give you all the different species that have opposite branching in North America. So MAD HORSE. All other trees actually have this alternate branching. So if you see the main branch, the branches are actually not coming opposite, but they're coming alternate from the branch. Okay, so we're going to do a little quick something because I think movement is great. So we're going to be pretending to be trees that have opposite branches. So you can go like this, See, your branches are coming opposite of each other. Now we're going to turn into trees that have alternate branching. Ready? You can drop one arm and put one leg out. Now this is a trick. How long can you stand here? It's doing well. I can't do it for too long. So that's a good way for yourself to remember the difference between opposite and alternate. Other clues that you can use to figure out if something is a maple or not. You can look sometimes to see if any old leaves are holding on to the tree. Maples tend to really lose their trees, unlike things like beech trees. So do you see the tree over there? That's a beech tree. Beech trees tend to hold on to their leaves. They also have very different bark, so you can tell them apart like right away. You can look for the leaves on the ground. You can also look at the bark of a tree, and the bark of a tree can be very different depending on the species. So those are the clues that you can use to figure out if something is a maple or not, even if you haven't done so in the fall. Yes, question?
Are we going to tap trees today?
We are. We certainly are. Do you have a question, my friend?
Yes. Why are the trees only going this way? Towards me.
That is an excellent question, my friend. The question is, why are the trees leaning towards us and towards this opening? Who has the answer? Do you know?
Facing the sun.
They're facing the sun. Yeah, they're trying to capture the sun. So there's an opening right here. So a lot of these trees are leaning over because they want to catch that sunlight. Good question and nice observation. Okay, so we identify our tree. That's the first step. We need to make sure that our tree is big enough because we can't trap any old tree. If a tree is too small, A, you're not going to get enough sap from it to do your work, and B, you could actually hurt the tree. So you need a tree that's at least 12 inches in diameter on the inside, and clearly we can't measure on the inside, right? So we have to figure out a different way to figure out if our tree is big enough. Who are my math whizzes over here and who can tell me how we figure out if a tree that has at least 12 inches in diameter? I knew there was an answer right there. Go ahead.
Don't you wrap you use like a piece of string, or you use like a bendable, what's it called, tape measure? You
Yep.
can wrap it around and then you can measure.
Exactly. So what you do, and I have one right here for me. What we do is we actually figure out the circumference, okay? And what we know is that a tree that has a diameter of about 12 inches, if you multiply that by pi, which is about 3.14, you're going to get the circumference of the tree. So you want a tree that's at least about 36 inches around. You want it about at least this big or bigger before you put a tap into it, okay? You also want to make sure that your tree is healthy. So if you see a tree and the branches are dying and there's like lots of insect damage, that may not be the tree for you, because A, you're not going to get that quality of sap, and B, you're going to stress that tree even more by putting a tap into it. So you really want healthy trees for this process. Okay, now let's talk about that sap. Now that we've found our tree, we know how big it's going to be. Let's talk about taking the sap out. So we have a little bit of equipment here, and I'm going to walk over. Okay, so the first thing you need is a drill, preferably a cordless drill, because typically in these areas we don't have a power source. I did this program a whole lot when I lived in Minnesota, and over there all the naturalists didn't even bother with the power drills. We used to have these hand drills that would take out, and we would drill the trees with that, and then you never have to worry that your battery is dead or anything. So that's something that I recommend. And this is a spile, okay? And this is essentially the tap that goes into the tree. So you drill a hole in the tree, you knock this in, and then you hang something to collect the sap. It could be a bucket. It could be a really clean plastic jug even. That has been sawed off, for instance. That's totally acceptable. The operative term, if you're really going to collect this for real, is to make sure your stuff is squeaky clean. So go ahead and follow protocols to get that stuff sanitized. You drill your hole, you hang your bucket, and then you put this in, a cover. Why do you think that we should be putting a cover on the bucket? Yes, my friend.
So rain and snow and stuff like that doesn't get in.
Exactly, because you don't want to dilute that sap even further. You don't want the sap to get even more watery. Yes, my friend.
And also, glucose and sugar and whatever, you don't want bugs that are going to get to it if you don't have a cover on it.
Exactly. Bugs will get into it, and other animals also really like sap. So they're all going to go after the sap. So make sure that you have a cover. So let's talk a little bit about sap. What is sap and how sweet do you think sap is? I'm going to put my equipment back. Any idea on how much sugar is in sap? Sap usually has about 2% of sugar. Did you have an answer? Little bit, yes. So sap, ooh, this is not good. Sap has about 2% sugar, and it's really hard to visualize. So I brought a little string of Cheerios to kind of give us an idea of what that looks like. So as you can see, the blue is the water, and the little red is it represents the sugar. So if you tasted the sap, it's not going to taste terribly sweet. It's going to be like a very mildly sweet mixture. Yes?
Don't you boil it for like more than a week to get all that condensed down?
You have to boil it quite a lot. It depends. The timing depends a little bit, but we're going to talk about that as well. But when you have syrup, it looks more like this. So this was just 2% sugar. This is a whole lot more. It's about 60% sugar. Which one would you rather have on your pancake? What do you think? Point. Does this win?
Yes.
I know, because this would be kind of like just putting water on your pancake. So this would be nice and sweet, about 66% sugar.
And it's
Now,
also thicker.
what's that?
And it's also thicker.
It is a lot thicker, so it's viscous because you boiled it down. Okay, so I promise we're almost ready to go tap that tree. So I wanted to show everybody a couple of clues on what maples look like. You can see, so this is a maple. This is actually the leaf of a red maple. I'm sure all of you recognize that. This one is actually the sugar maple right here. So sugar maple has a different leaf, but all maples actually can be used to produce syrup. Maples also have these fun seeds. Who can tell me what the seeds of a maple tree are called?
Okay.
Starts with an S. Any ideas? It's called a samara. Whoops. So they basically are winged fruits. Anyone's actually thrown down a helicopter seed in the?
Yeah.
Those are maple seeds. They are really fun to just kind of toss up and see where they land.
Maple trees in my backyard.
Yep. There's also, so there's different kinds of trees. Now, sugar maples are the ones that actually produce the most syrup. Okay, so they produce the best syrup. But all the other maples will produce syrup as well. Sugar maples have the most sugar content in their sap. Who knows what this tree is over here?
Is that dogwood?
It is not, but that's a great guess because it is an opposite. It's a super tricky question. This is actually a maple as well. It is called a box elder, and it grows everywhere, and nobody knows it's a maple because its leaves are different from the regular maple. It doesn't have that lovely Canadian flag shape. It actually has a compound leaf, but it's also a maple, and it will also produce syrup. Now, there are a couple of other trees that could be tapped. One of them is a black walnut, and black walnuts do grow around here in Pennsylvania. That syrup would taste pretty different. It also has a different sugar content inside the syrup. And the other one is a birch tree. So places like Alaska. So sugar maples do not grow in Alaska. They have totally different trees over there. People actually tap birch trees and they make products, but they'll taste different than ours maple syrup over here. Okay, very good. All right, any questions on any of that? Yeah.
They don't tap those trees here normally?
We do have birch trees over here, but they're not.
They don't tap them normally?
They don't tap them normally. Not in this region. This region mostly we tap. Yeah. Yeah, and the reason is really because if you have maple trees, that's the preferred option. All right. So then question.
How long have people been tapping trees to take the tap?
How long does it take to tap?
How long historically? When is history going to start?
Excellent question, and I was actually going to segue right over there. So the first people to tap the maple trees were not us or the modern humans. They were actually the Native Americans. So I'm going to tell you guys a Native American, some folklore from the Ojibwe tribe. The Ojibwe are a tribe that actually live far north. They are found in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and a couple of and parts of Michigan area that's far north. And that folklore goes like this. So Gichimantu, who was the creator of the universe, created a wonderful universe for their people. And they stocked it with everything that the people would need to survive. So they put plenty of game, beautiful lakes, plants, everything you could think of. The weather was excellent. And Gichimantu had the Ojibwe people gave them this land as a gift. Okay? So they were living happily on the land. And there's a spirit, the spirit is called Manabozo. And Manabozo is a good spirit, and he came down to check on the Ojibwe people one day. And he was looking for his people. He went to the lakes. They weren't there. They weren't harvesting the wild rice. They weren't fishing. He's like, where is everyone? So they then he went to their homes. They weren't cooking anything. And he kept looking for them in the forest. And finally he found them in the sugar bush. So that's where all the maple trees are. And the people were just basically sitting there and drinking maple syrup because Gichimantu had put maple syrup into the trees, not sap. And Manabozo got really upset. He said, why are people not working? Why are they not hunting? Why are they not preparing for winter? And so he had these birch bark containers, and he took those birch bark containers, he filled them with water, and he threw the water on the canopies of the trees, of the sugar maple trees, and he diluted all that syrup and he made it into sap. And he said, from now on, people are going to have to work really hard to get the syrup. You're going to have to tap a tree, you're going to have to boil the sap, and you're going to have to make your sap or sugar that way. So that is folklore. Now, the reality is that the Native Americans did tap the trees. They didn't have our modern equipment, so what they would do is they would cut slits on the trees. And in the spring, remember, temperatures going up above 40 during the day, and it gets colder at night, all that pressure is building up, the sap basically just starts pouring out. So they would put little birch bark, almost like sticks, to channel that into these birch bark containers. Birch is a big deal in this whole thing. And you collect all that sap. Now, they wouldn't boil the sap like we do today. What they would do is put hot stones into it to evaporate off the water. And actually, before they even did that, they did something else. They would collect the sap and they would actually put it out overnight. Now remember, the weather is such that the temperature is going to drop below freezing. So a layer of ice forms. Now ice is just water, there's no sugar in there. So they would actually collect the ice and throw it away, and that way get the volume down, and then they would start putting these hot stones and getting rid of the extra water so that they could make their product. Now they would not make maple syrup, they actually made maple sugar. So if you keep boiling and boiling and boiling, all you have left are the little red parts. All the water is gone and you just have sugar left. And the reason they actually used sugar is that it was very portable. So if they were going to go, for instance, hunting, they could take that as an energy source. And people are not the only ones in spring. Native American tribes really liked the sap because they were hungry after an entire winter. Their food stores are running low. It was a lovely source of energy to get this maple sugar. This maple sugar, and even the sap. They would drink the sap just to kind of get a boost of energy out there. Okay, so I think we are ready to go tap our tree. So I'm going to pull a couple of pieces of equipment. Oops. All right, so I've got my cordless drill. Okay. And I have done this program hundreds of times. The drill is always the part that trips me up every year. One year I ran it on reverse, and somebody actually, luckily that was somebody who was a little bit more technologically savvy who whispered it in my ear. hopefully none of that's going to happen today. Okay. And we are going to walk to that tree right over there. So if you want to get started over there, I'll join you in just a minute. We're not going far because all of this stuff, and I think we're ready. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure this tree is big enough.
There's already a hole in it.
Yeah. I know. You see the hole with that. Okay, so I'm going to give this tree a nice big hug and see if it is big enough. So I'm wondering if anybody from the audience can read for me how many inches around approximately this tree is.
56.
56 inches around. So that's more than the 36 inches that I needed to tap a tree. For me, I like to give the tree a nice big hug. And I know that if my hands touch, just barely touch or don't touch, we're good to go. That tree is big enough to take a tap. So we've done that. By the way, this is actually called a measurement that's called diameter at breast height. And that is something that foresters do all the time. That's how they measure their height. And it came from, back in the past, people would take the tape measure and they would all these lumberjacks would actually measure right up to their breastbone right here, their chest. And that's why it's called diameter at breast height. It standardizes things somewhat. Maybe, it's approximately about 4 feet off the ground is where we take that measurement. Okay. So we're going to ignore this hole. If you do find a hole in your tree, just don't drill in the same exact spot because the tissues have gotten damaged over time. So if you do find holes on a tree, just pick a different spot and you can do that. And I'm going to actually drill a hole somewhat right over here. You also want to make sure that your drill is facing up a little bit so that your sap starts flowing downwards. Can everybody see?
Yeah. Now I can't.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. Okie dokie. So I went in almost to about an inch to an inch and a half in there. And I'm looking to see if my wood shavings are wet, because that's kind of a tip off to me that I've hit the right tissue. You definitely don't want to go too far in because you're going to miss the tissues that conduct the water, and so then you won't get any sap. I don't know if I have, oh, look at this, the sap, everyone, look at this, the sap's already starting to flow. You all see that? I've made this hole. So the next thing I do is I'm actually going to just remove the shavings because I don't want anything blocking. And I'm going to use a really nice and scientific tool just to stick off the ground. Is that how you guys did it when you were tapping too? Okay. All right, I'm going to put this down here. Whoops. Just everyone be careful, don't step over here. Let's take a look. This is a bit of a big stick. Wow, it's gushing. Look at that, beautiful. Okay. Okay.
Oh god. That is.
So next thing I want to do is to put my file in. So here's the other tip. If this is something that you could presumably do in your houses, just make sure the little hole is facing down because you want to catch the sap as it's rising. Alrighty, and I forgot my hammer.
I thought they used this file in the Hunger Games, the movie series.
Oh, really?
Hammer's right there. Yeah.
Is my hammer right
I have
there?
it.
Oh, you've got it. Thank you. Thanks, Noelle.
Gave it to me.
Alrighty, so I'm going to just go ahead and hammer this in. Alrighty, and you can see that the sap is flowing. We're going to hang the bucket up next.
The little hook for the bucket.
This is the little hook for the bucket right here. Alrighty, so the hook is going in over here. And after I hang this up, you know what? In fact, before I put the hat on or the cap on, I'm gonna ask everyone, if you want to take a good look at the sap dripping, you can come do so. Just do it in small groups, please. Don't bunch. There'll be plenty of time. Everyone can take a look. There it goes. It's so clear. It looks like that. The bucket is a little bit. I know.
That's flavor.
And this is actually a math extension. So I would do this sometimes for school groups, like as part of the curriculum. And so we would do this math extension where they had to figure out the rate of flow based on the drips. Like, so you can actually hear, today for some reason I can't hear but a lot of times you'll actually hear the sound of the water or the sap hitting. But I won't make you do math today. Today's just a fun program.
A little vial, and then I'll like measure it, and then do it like that. Too.
You could do it with a volume, absolutely. That would be the more scientific way of doing it, of course. All right, so I'm going to put this cover on. So questions, anyone, about this process?
No.
How long does it normally take to collect all the sap?
That's an excellent question. It really depends on the weather a lot of the time. So I've done this program where I've put this, I put it on just on the right day. I've got the bucket on and I come back in like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it's like there's quite a lot of sap in there. But remember, it takes 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. 40 to 1. So that's oh, good question. It's probably a few gallons, maybe 2.5 gallons is my guess. So it's a lot of work to actually boil this, to make the syrup and bottle it.
How much sugar can you get from 40 gallons of maple syrup?
40 gallons of sap.
Yeah, right.
You get 1 gallon of syrup, but how much sugar, I wouldn't know in terms of volume. I haven't ever calculated that. It would probably be a lot less because you're then boiling off all the water.
Is this the time of year you typically would be tapping the trees to get the sap?
Yes, this is the only time of year that you can actually do this because the sap is, that sugar-filled sap is actually down in the roots, it's coming up. So you need days that are above 40 degrees and nights that are below 32, so below freezing. That's the ideal conditions for this for you to tap the trees. Now, one of the things is we know our climate is changing, and so this is actually making the syruping process a lot more unpredictable. Now, this is a huge industry. Do you guys know, who knows who the top producer of maple syrup is? Any guesses?
Canada.
Canada. Which specific province? Do you know the province in Canada that makes the most sugar or syrup? What's that? Ontario is a good guess, but it is not. It's the neighboring province, Quebec. Exactly. The province of Quebec actually produces almost 70% of the maple syrup produced globally. So that's a huge industry for them. Which state in the United States? And yes, our Blue Jays are uncommonly loud today. They've been really active. What state in the United States actually is the biggest producer?
Vermont.
Vermont, excellent. So Pennsylvania also does produce maple syrup, just a lot less. But it is an industry, and so with our weather changing and becoming more unpredictable, this could actually affect the maple syruping season. And the problem is it's a short window. So once the weather changes and the day and the night are both above freezing, then your window is really gone. The sap will start changing its taste. As soon as the buds start bursting, the sap you can't collect it anymore because it becomes this buddy sap. It's not going to make nice syrup. Yes, ma'am.
Is that why you have multiple buckets going at one time?
Exactly. So what people do is they put multiple buckets. In fact, if you're a commercial grower or producer, you're not even dealing with buckets anymore. What you do is you put in the spiles just like this, and then you put these, do you know?
No, I never heard of it before, but I just assumed they'd probably use a hose.
It's PVC piping. It's kind of like a hose of a certain diameter. And then you basically put that right in here, capture the sap, and basically just put it downhill towards your sugar shack. Well, that's where you're doing your evaporation. There was a gentleman here who actually contacted the Conservancy just a couple of days ago saying that he actually boils sap and makes syrup every year. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today to tell us about it because he's busy boiling. But you know, they have evaporators that they use. They're almost like flat pans, so that you have just a little bit of sap, and so that make sure that all the water is evaporating, and that's how you get your syrup and you get bottled. So that's part of the reason why, if you notice, maple syrup, pure maple syrup with no additives, is actually pretty expensive. And you know now why, because it is kind of a lengthy process. It is a sustainable part of the agriculture. It's sustainable agriculture because you're not really hurting the trees. At the end of the season, everyone just removes the spiles, and you don't block the tree or anything. The tree will heal itself over time. Just remove the spile and walk away, and then you can do this whole process again next year. More questions? Yeah.
Can you get that out of a dead tree?
That is an excellent question, and someone asked me that last time as well. If you have a completely dead tree, chances are no, because you don't have sap that's stored in the roots, and it's, you know, the pressure is not building over time. If you had a stump and the root is completely in the ground and you just cut off the tree, I've seen stumps that actually produce sap, even if they're, you know, because they're still sort of technically alive. But that's a good question. Other questions? Yeah.
Are there other ways people use the sap other than for making sugar or syrup?
Yes, people use sap for all sorts of things, including, I've heard, making beer. So, yeah.
When you talk about putting multiple buckets on a tree, I mean, isn't there such a thing as like maxing out the tree? And
Yes,
really
absolutely. So the maximum number of trees that you can taps that you can ever put on a tree is 3. And it all goes by diameter. So if your diameter is 12 inches, you can put 1 tap. 12 through 24 inches, you can put 1 tap. If you have a tree that's more than 24 inches in diameter, now we're starting to talk about a big tree, you can put 2 taps. And then there's a certain measurement, and I can't remember right off the top of my head, where you could put 3 taps, but that's it. But that's a great question.
Is it clean enough to drink?
Sap, so when I did programs in the past and before COVID, now I'm not doing it, but we would actually have kids come in and just sort of give them a taste of the sap. Yes, it is totally clean enough to drink. It's not, when you actually begin to boil it, what people usually do is they filter it through like a cheesecloth or something, because there will be little impurities. I mean, it's coming from a tree, but it's totally, yeah. You can actually buy the sap. In fact, you can buy bottles of sap, I think, in certain stores.
Don't they like sulfurize it as well? Like those are the sulfur.
I'm sorry?
I think they like sulfurize it in some places. You get like a sulfurized maple sap thing.
Oh, I've never actually seen that. Other questions? So ordinarily, I was going to take all of you on a little hike through the woodlands here and maybe talk about some native trees, but I'm thinking that this is just an ice pit and I don't want to take a risk. But I do want to share with all of you that if you kind of look on the side over there, do you see all those green tubes there? Those are all plantings that the Mount Lebanon Nature Conservancy has been engaged in. These all went in last year. We are actually in the process of putting in native trees to just, you know, expand the number of trees out here. So if you're interested in volunteering, it's a fantastic opportunity to get out here and really do something for our parks. We usually have sign-ups. It's actually, I think it's already on our calendar, if I had to guess.
Yeah, they've been trying to do the 3rd Saturday of the month, at least for invasives, and then they'll check the calendar. There's several other programs. She has a couple more programs coming up, and any activities are on our calendar.
Yeah, so that's a great way of just getting involved in your your parks over here. But the other thing is, you know, I encourage everyone to learn more about native plants. So Bernadette did mention invasive versus native. We do have, unfortunately, invasives that we need to remove. Those are plants that really don't belong to our system over here, and we're trying to basically put natives to over here. But I encourage all of you to research natives and do native plantings in your own homes, because that's just the best way. I mean, we don't have enough land over here we can put all the trees we want over here, but this is still a limited parcel of land. If each one of us put in a few native trees into our own yards, not only do you reap the benefits from the shade and all of that, but you've done something really nice for the environment. So, all right. Any more questions?
Why are native plants important?
Why? That's a wonderful question. How many hours do you have? No, I'm just kidding. So the reason that native plants are actually so important is that they actually belong to the ecosystem. So a lot of things depend upon the native plants. So for instance, a lot of landscapers put in this tree called a calorie pear. And you know, while it looks nice and it probably has no pests because it doesn't belong to this ecosystem, no insects can actually use it. So you want trees that belong to the ecosystem. Something like an oak tree, a native oak tree, will host so many caterpillars and so many butterflies will come out of that, and other insects. And insects are really kind of the linchpin. They're the bottom of the food chain, and without insects we wouldn't be here today. So native plants are actually really important, and it's important to landscape with them. And I think the landscape industry is slowly changing, but we all need to encourage them to change faster by just demanding native plants that you can use. And it doesn't have to be trees, it could be shrubs, it could be wildflowers, lots of different options for native trees. Any other questions?
What's your favorite native plant?
Oh, excellent question. I have to say the sugar maple, just because I like doing this program personally, and I just think it's a neat and beautiful tree. But I like a lot of native plants.
How can you take just like if you have like one sugar maple, can you half it and then like boil it in your own kitchen and make like some sap for yourself?
Oh, that is a wonderful question. You can do this. I recommend highly not to do this in your kitchen. It will produce so much water that it's just too much steam. Do it outside. And you know, you can do an open, like just a fire, and you can boil it outdoors. That's totally fine. You don't have to have a whole lot of fancy equipment. If you have a candy thermometer, which are widely available, all you need to make sure is that when the syrup is ready, it's going to come to a temperature of 219 degrees Fahrenheit. That's when you know your syrup is good to go, and you can bottle it. And so it's a very simple process, really. You could do it at home, but so expect to spend a lot of time boiling, and don't expect a whole lot of syrup. So, all right. Well, thank you everyone for coming to our program.
Is it worth it to do it?
And check out our website. Check out the Mount Lebanon Nature Conservancy's website. Join if you can. We'd love to have you back for our program, and we'd love your support.